Cool.
At what age did you start playing soccer? And was it something that you decided on, or was it something that your parents were like, okay, we have to get him out of the house. We have to get him in something that gets that energy out?
Um, I was always playing sports from a young age. I think soccer was probably one of the first ones that I started with, maybe at the age of like 5, just because kind of in my area there was a structure, a setup for rec soccer around here. But yeah, I was just always an active kid, always loved to be outside, always loved to play sports. So soccer was probably one of the first ones that I got involved with.
And then did you ever imagine that you would be playing in college?
I think I always imagined that I wanted to play in college kind of once I got old enough to understand what college athletics were. And you see a little bit of it on TV and you think that's really cool, and I love to be a part of that. So I think, yeah, kind of maybe once I got more towards middle school and high school and understood really what college athletics were, then I definitely wanted to be a part of it.
But you didn't go straight into DT. You stopped at a community college first. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so I have a kind of crazy story of how I found my way to playing college soccer. I originally out of high school, I had committed to a Division 3 school called Endicott College it's in a little bit north of Boston in Beverly, Massachusetts. And I had been recruited by this school and kind of told all the right things by the coach. And then when I showed up to campus for preseason, I think there were like 45 or 50 of us. And he was basically like, all right, this is a tryout and I'm keeping the best. I think he kept like 25 players or something. So after a couple days, he didn't want to keep me on the team and cut me from the team. And so then I had to go back home and return to campus when all the general population, the general students came back to school. So I went a whole year at Endicott without playing soccer, just being a student. And it was a good experience, but I missed the game so much. And I wasn't as happy as I felt I fully could have been. So then after that freshman year, I decided that I wanted to keep trying to play. So I dropped out of Endicott and I enrolled in a community college called Tompkins Cortland Community College, which is out in Western New York. Yeah, just to give me the opportunity to try and keep playing a little bit and to try something new.
And how did that go for you?
It was a great experience. I think so many ups and downs with it. It was a completely new kind of culture and area that I'd ever been used to. It was, I don't know how many people are familiar with New York, but it was kind of right in between like Ithaca and Syracuse. So it was a little bit kind of out in the country, which is, not something that I was used to, but I met some amazing people there. I got to play soccer there for 2 years. I have great friends from there, great coaches, and I just got to play the sport that I love again. And that was really the biggest thing for me. I still got to study. I got my associate's degree from there. Probably saved a little bit of money as well, looking back on it, taking a break from the 4-year education. Yeah, I look back with some really fond memories of that time.
It seems like there's a sweeping wave of juco players coming into the Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3 levels. Was it like that when you were kind of making that move? I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but I feel like there's been a resurgence of that kind of movement recently.
Yes, I think now, especially with the way that COVID has affected higher education, I think the junior college route has become a lot more appealing to student athletes. And I think they're correct in that assumption. Just the idea of, especially when universities were completely remote and, students were paying full tuition, it was kind of like, well, I could do the same thing at a community college and I could save a little bit of money. So I think the junior college route, like you said, has kind of had that resurgence. And I think even at the time when I was there, there's definitely not a lack of talent. It was funny. I was just having a conversation with someone recently about this, and junior college is such an interesting landscape for athletics because you have certain programs that are phenomenal and they have tremendous players. You know, I can use the example of soccer, as there were some programs where there were lots of players that would come from overseas, and then they would go and they would play junior college, and they would go on to Division 1 or Division 2 schools, like you mentioned. And then there were some programs where, you know, it was kind of, okay, who's on campus, who's attending this school, and do they want to play soccer? And you know, those teams didn't do quite the best. So you would have just a huge disparity in talent level. But at the top, as you mentioned, there were really some quality athletes.
And then what kind of resources were allotted to you as a student athlete at a community college?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that is one thing, and it's just kind of the nature of community college, right? It's not quite as well funded as a bigger program, as a bigger athletics program. So there was a little bit more of kind of have to do it on your own, I guess, especially when it came to, you know, wanting to transfer to a four-year institution after community college. That was kind of, you know, your coaches would help you out a little bit, but a lot of that work really had to come down to you getting it done on your own if you wanted to make it happen. We had, let's see, I think we had one athletic trainer, and she had like one assistant kind of, for all of our sports. And granted, we didn't have as many, you know, sports as a big time school, but still, and you know, in the fall you had men's and women's soccer. I think we had a cross country team at the time. You know, each season had a couple of sports, so it was a lot. Yeah, that was one thing I think maybe a little bit less on the resources side, for sure.
And then what was your first experience with mental health resources? Because it doesn't sound like it was at that community college.
No, no, it definitely wasn't. Probably first experience with mental health resources was when I went to my four-year institution. It was called Chestnut Hill College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And probably in my senior year, I had just felt like I probably needed, you know, a little bit of outreach, a little bit of support in that regard. So I sought that out there.
And let's take a step back and talk about that transfer experience, because you said you were doing it on your own. How did you know what to do?
Funny enough, it was a little bit similar to when I was first applying to colleges out of high school. So I kind of had some experience doing it once, and then went on to do it again with the transfer experience. The only real difference is now making sure that you get all of your transcripts and all of your credits sent over from your institution to where you want to go to next. Um, Other than that, though, the process is kind of similar. So luckily I had that to fall back on and remember that experience. But yeah, it was just a lot of it was just kind of knowing that it was something I really wanted to do and really wanted to make happen. So, you know, Google is sometimes your best friend. You know, what do you need to be able to transfer to a school? What kind of documents are required? What's the application process like? Sometimes it was reaching out to the admissions staff on the universities that I was looking to attend to, and also with the coaching staffs of the universities that I was trying to transfer to as well, just trying to get as much help as I could from the other side as well.
And then you found your home in a D2 school. So what was the difference between D2 resources on the other end of the transfer portal and where you had been? I mean, how did you know
Yeah.
that this was the right place?
So it's a very funny story too of how I wound up in Philly. I so after I finished my associate's degree in Cortland, New York, there is a SUNY school, so a State University of New York school called SUNY Cortland, right over there. And I had been in contact with that coach, and I was, already in the area. So I was like, hey, I'd like to continue my education here. SUNY Cortland has a really great soccer program, and I would love to come and play for that team. And we had some good conversations. It seemed like things were going well. I was actually going to graduate in the winter, so I would have been able to enroll in the spring and start training with the team in the spring, and hopefully kind of get a little bit of my feet under me and then be ready to go for the fall season. And then, just the way things go sometimes in college athletics and athletics in general, for whatever reason, there was a conversation had down the road once I was already enrolled at Cortland that was like, oh, actually, you're not going to be able to train with us in the spring. And then I was like, okay, so how does the fall look? And the coach had gotten to see me play, I think a week or two after that conversation, and was like, yeah, I think you could come for a walk-on tryout, but I don't know if I see you as being part of the team. Don't know if I see you as a member of this team. Which, for those who don't know, like a walk-on tryout is kind of it's usually happens about 2 weeks into preseason. So the team's already been training for 2 weeks. And then, whoever's on campus and wants to try out for the team, they get a 1-day shot to come out and try and prove themselves, which it's possible for any player to do, but it's extremely difficult to make that happen. So I kind of was left in a similar situation again, where I didn't have a home. I didn't have a place where I could keep playing and finish my degree. And it just so happened that one of my friends at community college was in contact with this coach from Philly. His name's Julian Fernandez. I still speak to him this day. He's an awesome guy. And so I said, oh, what the hell? I'll reach out. And I reached out to this school in Philly, and he was like, yeah, if you want to come down, check us out. I did. Turns out my friend was going to go there as well. So we both kind of transferred there together. And yeah, I think I decided in the summer before enrolling in the fall that I was going to transfer out of Cortland and then go to Philadelphia. So crazy experience again.
I mean, I feel like I hear so many stories about just getting lost in the transfer portal when you're going
Yes.
from not only D1 to D1, but also JUCO to D1 or JUCO to D2. And then, I mean, there's so much movement, and some players just perpetually get stuck. But it sounds like you didn't spend that much time trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way that you just describe it there. There's so many players that they get kind of lost in the shuffle, or they get stuck. And it can be for so many different reasons. I think now, having a little bit more of a perspective of what it's like to be a college coach as well, I can understand how sometimes players do just get lost in the shuffle. Like these Division I college coaches are getting hundreds or thousands of emails from students looking to attend their university, and they're trying to keep tabs on everybody, and they're trying to help everybody that they can, or that they're really interested in. But like you said, the perfect way to describe it is some players just kind of get lost in the shuffle. So it really takes, especially when you're in the transfer portal, it really takes you being proactive and being on top of everything that you need to, communicating thoroughly and effectively with coaches, with admissions, and just making sure that you get where you need to go.
And then once you got where you needed to be, how did you see the availability of resources, not only mental health, but things like athletic training that you bare bones had at your community college, things like nutrition, things like athletic training and mental health resources? I mean, how did that shift now that you were at a higher level school?
Yeah, definitely. I had more access to resources at my Division II school, for sure. I think still what is unique about college athletics in general, and what maybe some people don't know, is it really kind of just depends on the individual program itself, not necessarily always what division it is. There's some Division III schools that have amazing facilities, amazing resources, amazing support because they're super well funded. And there's some Division Is where it's, not quite at that level. So it just comes down to each individual situation. And I would encourage, any athletes who are maybe listening to this to kind of look at it from that perspective, rather than just going, okay, it's Division I, it's going to be better. Think about, what that individual school has to offer you. So from an athletic training perspective, from that side of it, definitely had more access to trainers, to more equipment, some of the whirlpools, hot tubs, stuff like that, access to doctors. From the nutrition side, it was probably kind of just whatever the athletic training staff could offer to us as well, whatever they could kind of give in terms of insight or advice. We didn't really have a dedicated nutritionist or dietitian or anything like that at my school. And then the mental health side was kind of through just there wasn't a specific student athlete mental health resource, I guess is what I would say. It was more so through the school in general, through their psychology department, through their mental health support for the student population.
And did you use those resources at all when you were in college?
I did by the time, yeah, by my senior year, I did. And it was kind of brought up to me by a friend who had started to use the resources, and he had some success with it. So I was like, okay, let me see if I can give this a try. And it's no disrespect to the staff there. It just wasn't exactly what I felt that I needed. I think sometimes in college mental health departments, they see so many students, and so many students have real issues, and it's almost, I describe it as almost kind of like a triage process. Like I would come in to, whenever I would see the mental health counselor I was seeing, I would enter, and my check-in was like on an iPad, it was like a check-in list of kind of, what are you feeling, ranking like 1 to 5. Like, are you stressed? Are you tired? Just kind of checking in mentally and emotionally. And then we would go into the office, and then she would kind of go over what like I had filled out on the checklist, and then just give me kind of like breathing strategies, or kind of taught me how to like box breathe, and taught me how to do stuff like that, just to kind of cope, I guess. And I think for me, it was more so I just needed somebody to kind of talk to, just to kind of help me through some of the problems that I was having, and less so, figuring out just how to cope with the more physical side of anxiety or things like that.
Was anxiety what you were predominantly dealing with, or was there something different?
Yeah, I've dealt with anxiety, I've dealt with depression before. And I think kind of right around that time, when I was 22, 23, was the first time where I'd really kind of sought help for it. I think it was always kind of something in the back of my head where I was like, there's just certain times where I'm not sure if I'm handling this the best way, or, I'm not sure if I'm processing my emotions in the most healthy way. So I think I need to, at some point, like, work through this properly. And yeah, so that was the first time when I really sought out some external help for it.
And then how did your college career end? I mean, are you proud of the player you became?
You know what? I am. I think for me, from the start, when I first wanted to go to that Division 3 school, and then I got cut, to then find my way to a Division 2 school and play against some phenomenal players, with some phenomenal players, be able to be a starting player, to just kind of prove to myself that I was capable of playing at that level. And to be able to do it was such an amazing feeling. Did I win tons of championships or have tons of accolades as a college athlete? No, but for me, it was just like, you hear so many times, no, like, you're not good enough, or no, you can't play at this level. To then go out and do it and prove, no, I can do this, I can play at this level, was, you know, enough of a satisfactory moment for me. And just to kind of prove too, that I'm not crazy, that I'm not thinking this, and it's not true. Because you hear it enough times, and you start to think, oh man, am I maybe not good enough? Can I not play at this level? And it's just what, I had that little bit of extra self-belief to keep on going, and to make it. And I think for me, looking back on my college career, yeah, I can definitely be satisfied with with how it played out.
Where did that self-confidence come from?
Huh, that's a good question. I think, you know, I would love to say that it was just it came all from myself, and I think that's part of it. I definitely had an internal belief in myself, but I think it was also coupled with kind of when I would hear, because anytime I was in a team and I would be with a team for a while, I would have teammates that would have confidence in me and would believe in me and tell me that I'm a good player and I'm a valuable member of the team, you know? And so when you hear that from the guys that you're working with day in and day out, and then you go somewhere else and a coach is like, I don't think so, I would always just kind of take the word of the guys who I'd been training with and playing with for however long, so I knew guys that I played high school with or club soccer with, or then when I wound up at JUCO, those guys, they believed in me as a player. So I was like, all right, if they believe in me, then there has to be something here as well. I also had great support from family as well. My mom has been tremendous and always just supporting me in whatever I wanted to do. And even if it seemed like a crazy idea sometimes, transferring to a school or doing something different, she was always just one to be like, okay, how do I help? How do we make this happen? So yeah, it's internal, but it takes a village as well to build up that self-confidence and that self-belief.
And then what happened after college? I I was listening to an episode of your podcast and you mentioned that you had gone to Germany and Denmark to play. How did those international opportunities come about?
Yeah, after I graduated, the other beautiful thing about the college experience that I had was I got to play with a lot of international players, a lot of players from overseas, and they would kind of describe the way that their professional or semi-professional system worked in their countries. And there's such a huge structure of leagues, and players can play at all sorts of levels and all sorts of different ages and make a little bit of money doing it as well. And I just thought, I've come this far. I love the game. I want to keep trying to see if I can do this, to see if I can play at a higher level. And so that first year after I graduated, I stayed in Philly. I was working a bunch of jobs. I had a day job. I was coaching college. I was coaching a club team as well, just saving up some money, training and playing as well, trying to find an opportunity to see if I could, maybe go overseas or find somewhere to play next. And I just stumbled across something on social media. Actually, there was a club who had come over to the United States a couple of times to scout players at like different events where college players like seniors and guys who had graduated would go to try and get seen. And they had brought some American players over. And so I just reached out to them and I said, hey, I've seen you've signed some American players. Are you looking for anyone more? Here's my highlight video. Here's my resume, kind of. And they got back to me and said, yeah, well, I'd love to have you over. And so then in the summer of 2019 was when I moved over to Germany.
And how was that experience? Because you're also talking about the fact that you don't speak German on your
Yeah,
podcast. You're like, I speak English and I speak Spanish, and I don't know what these teammates are saying.
yeah. And even my Spanish, I definitely wouldn't describe that as fluent. Yeah, it was my original plan had been, I had played with a buddy who was Australian. And so in the summer, I was going to go and visit my friend in Australia, and he knew a couple of teams. So I was going to see if I could maybe try out with them. I was going to stay with him. It was more just going to be to see him and visit him and see a new place and also maybe try out with some teams. And then while I had this trip planned, all of a sudden this Germany opportunity came up. So I still went to Australia, but then, instead of flying home after Australia, I decided I was going to fly to Germany next. And so, yeah, I probably had a couple months, maybe 2 or 3 months of prep, and, quickly downloaded Duolingo and tried to get as much German as I could in. Um, and yeah, I was in an interesting club because there were quite a bit of Americans there. There actually wasn't a ton of Germans there. We only had like a small handful, but we had a lot of just players from all over the world. It was a very international team. So definitely that language barrier, that communication piece came into play. And funny enough, it actually was, not just German and English. It was also, English and Portuguese and English and Spanish, and just kind of figuring out a way to stay united and to communicate through the game.
I had an episode probably 15 weeks ago, and it was this semi-pro. I think he's like 19 or 20 at this point, and he went over to Italy and
Mm,
didn't speak the language. He's from like the United States, and he and his mom were walking in a plaza at night, and he was just kicking a soccer ball around, and he made a friend because they started passing the ball back and forth, and they don't speak the same language, but his mom was just like, soccer is such a universal language, and that was how I knew that this was going to be where he fit in.
yeah.
I mean, that's why I think it's so interesting to talk to athletes who have international play experience, because especially in soccer, it's so universal.
Yeah, 100%. It was always just fun to try and to figure out a way to try and communicate with, your teammates, because everyone has a different level of fluency or understanding of. There were some of the Brazilian guys who also spoke fluent English, so they would kind of be the translators. I always felt a little bit bad for them because there was just so much put on their shoulders. They had to communicate all the different ideas from the coaching staff or from other players. It was always like, some of the Brazilian guys who couldn't speak English would like look for somebody who could and bring them over, be like, here, come help me. Yeah, like I played as a right back a lot of the time in Germany, and many games the guy who played right in front of me as a right winger was Brazilian and like didn't really know probably 5 words of English. And it was just, we kind of, had an understanding of just the way that the game works, and we wound up playing pretty well together. And unfortunately, I can't really tell you much about like him as a person just because we never really were able to communicate, and he probably can't do the same about me. But we always have, you know, that connection, that time where we play together. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about soccer, is it's like, even if you can't always communicate verbally, there's some way in which you can communicate.
Do you think that that transcends sport, or do you think that that's localized to international play, where you have a bunch of different people coming in from 25 different countries?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can't think of another kind of circumstance where there is that same universal language. I mean, maybe music or something like that, where kind of the notes and the way the music should sound, it is all universal to whoever the trained ear is. But yeah, I think sports is a really unique arena where it transcends that communication from a verbal level, and it's just the game, the communication becomes that universal language of whatever the sport is.
And then how long did you spend in Germany before going to Denmark?
I was in 2019, I was in Germany. I stayed there until December of 2019, and then I had found an opportunity with a higher level club in Germany to return in March of 2020, which, as we all know, is a month where things change just a little bit. So it was actually, I was supposed to fly, I think March 14th or 15th of 2020 to Germany. And it was like on the Wednesday or Thursday of that week was my flight. And Saturday, Sunday, Monday, all of a sudden, okay, the NCAA tournament isn't going to happen. Now they're stopping play of basketball. Now, like, the dominoes were just falling, and I was like, you know what? I don't. And Europe was pretty aggressive in terms of their lockdown as well. I had one or two friends that were still over there in Europe, and they were saying like they weren't sure if they were going to be able to get back home and stuff like that. So I was like, I just don't think it's the right move for me to fly over to Germany and potentially get stuck over there and then have soccer not happen, have the league be canceled, which wound up being the right decision because I think 2 weeks later, the league shut down over there. And then, as we know, travel restrictions became insane for the following really 2 years after that. So I didn't go in March 2020. And then it was just kind of a weird time of just being in limbo of, not really knowing when or how the world was going to be able to open up, not really sure how sports fit into that, how soccer fit into that. And it was just kind of taking time to reassess and figure out, okay, is that Germany opportunity the best for me? Should I just wait and see if the country opens and I can go back one day, or should I look somewhere else? And so I started to look, just other places as well, speaking to contacts, emailing teams, and I found this Denmark opportunity. And it wasn't actually until February of 2021, so pretty much almost a whole year later, when we were finally able to make it work for me to be able to fly over there. And even then it was a little dicey trying to get into Europe at that time. So yeah, it was quite a while in between, actually, Germany and Denmark.
And then can you compare the resources in Germany versus Denmark once you did eventually get there?
Yeah. So I think this is an important thing for players to understand. I can't speak for other sports as well, but definitely for soccer, I think players that are early on in their professional career and want to try and make a career for it, the lower level clubs, there's just really not a whole lot of resources, unfortunately, at all. And because the reality is, like, these clubs are just trying to support themselves, be able to keep the lights on in their stadium and put jerseys on the field. And also for those clubs that can afford to pay players, that money in college that would normally be going towards the resources of an athletic training staff and a nutritionist and mental health resources, those are now going towards, paychecks for the players. So it's kind of a trade-off in that regard. So really it was like in Germany, we had I think one trainer. She wasn't even really like a trainer, I don't think. I think she was like she might have honestly even been like a massage therapist or something, who just also had a little bit of a physio background, who would come and like once a week check out any player who was injured. And if you needed extra, then you might need to go to the doctor or to the hospital or something to get looked at. And then in Denmark, there wasn't really, it was like, you had to speak to your coaches, and if you really needed to get something checked out, and then they had a doctor who was kind of like a friend of the club that they would bring in every so often for players who would need it. Yeah. And I mean, that's obviously, I know you're referring to the mental health side of it as well. And I think the answer to your question there is there's really not much to be seen in terms of what a club like that can provide for you.
And your experience in Denmark had a whole host of issues. Can you start with the issue with your player's license?
Yeah. So at first it was a struggle just to get into the country, honestly, during COVID at that time. So that was a crazy, stressful story. Finally getting into the country, quarantining for 10 days, and then I start training, and I'm able to play in the preseason matches because those aren't like sanctioned or official really. And then it's about to be the first game, and I get have a conversation with my coach, and he's like, yeah, so we're trying to get you registered, but for whatever reason, your player's license hasn't come through yet. And I'm kind of like frustrated because I've already been in the country for a while now. And I'm like, I know it's not really anyone's fault per se, but I'm like, why hasn't this process been started sooner? Why am I just finding out about it, a couple days before we're supposed to play the first match? So he tells me that. And then it was just, again, it goes back to kind of what you're saying. Like, do you have support? Do you have resources, or is it like on your own? And a lot of it became on my own, checking with my previous club in Germany, did you send everything that you needed to over to this new club? And they're like, yes. And then, trying to figure out with it's called the FA, the Footballing Association, okay, where's the problem? What's the mishap? And, there was a couple of phone calls that I had to make where, before I called, I rehearsed over and over. I was like, okay, this is how you say, do you speak English? And in Danish. And so they'd answer the phone and I'd ask them, do you speak English? And they'd be like, oh yeah. And then, so I would go through and try and figure out, okay, what's the problem with my player's license? So a couple of phone calls like that. And then sometimes with things like that, it just seems to be a waiting game. And I don't really know if anyone knows why. And that's just kind of what it turned into. And then eventually, a couple weeks later, I finally got my player's license. And I think honestly, the process had been started on time because it took about 2 or 3 weeks to come in. And that's the normal processing period for a transfer for an international player. And I think it was just, didn't know that, they needed to do that for an international player. And they just kind of started it too late and then wound up getting it a couple weeks too late.
And then what else happened in Denmark? Because you ended up leaving, not on the most amazing terms. What led up to that exit?
Yeah, it was Denmark was probably one of the most difficult times in my life, to be honest, because I was so excited. I was so excited to get over there and keep pursuing my dream of trying to play at the next level. And I had this nice place to stay in, a little bit better than the place I was staying in Germany. And I had a great club. It was a good level. It was everything all right over there?
My cat just tried to jump up on the table. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. Yeah, I had a great club to play for. I had a really supportive coach he was probably honestly my biggest resource for mental health stuff because he was always an advocate for that and wanted to check in with me. But it was such an isolating and difficult experience. It was, not to mention it was during the height of COVID and, everything was pretty much shut down. You couldn't really go out and socialize in a way that was normal pre-pandemic. But I didn't really have anyone as a support system. And I didn't really have anything to kind of keep me going besides just football. And I was just pouring myself into it every so often when I have training. And it just mentally, I wasn't doing well. And I was like, I was pursuing this because I thought this is what I would love and what I was going to be happy with. And it just stopped feeling like that. And I was like, and then also too, with not having my player's license, then I wasn't even playing in matches. And I was like, all right, like this is such a difficult place for me to be in. Is this the right move for me to keep staying here and trying to push through this? And so I did wind up leaving a little bit early than my 90-day visa. I think I probably left with like 20 days on it or something like that. Maybe missed like two or three more games. But yeah, it was just a really tough time, really isolating and lonely time.
And then you brought an injury with you that you didn't realize you had sustained in Denmark. And then once you came back to the United States, it flared up. Can you talk through that and also your experience playing with the Shockers?
Yeah. Yeah. When I was over in Denmark, I just kind of felt like a little twinge in my hamstring, and but I didn't really think much of it. And again, like we spoke about before, there wasn't a ton of athletic training resources or physio resources, so it was kind of just stretch and ice and heat as needed. And but unfortunately, with muscle strains and stuff like that, if there is something wrong, you do kind of have to take some time off of it. And I wasn't really doing that when I was in Denmark. And then so the trainings, they were also a little bit lighter because we were in season. So it was like 1 or 2 days a week, it was a little bit heavier, but then the other days it was a little bit lighter because we had matches on the weekend. So then when I came home, I took a little bit of time off from soccer completely, and then went right into a preseason with Shockers, which was really intense, really strenuous, and a lot of fitness, a lot of 11 versus 11. So there's a lot of running, and I think 2 weeks into it, maybe, I just felt a really sharp pain, a really sharp pull on my hamstring, and then I was out for, I think, 5 or 6 weeks doing physical therapy and trying to get right. And so yeah, it was a really difficult time in 2021 to go from Denmark, where I was, questioning whether I wanted to keep doing this. I was not in a great space mentally at all. And then I came home and I was like, okay, well, this is, maybe this is the perfect opportunity for me. It's a team that's almost right in my backyard, and I can see if I still love soccer. And then boom, get an injury. And that's kind of just sometimes what I feel is the nature of sports.
At what point in your career, and it sounds like the answer is probably Denmark, but at what point in your career did you realize that soccer had stopped being fun?
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I think most professional athletes that you'll talk to, there's kind of like a shift in their mentality about their sport. I remember I was speaking to a player. His name's Jake Keegan. He plays for the Greenville Triumph in the United States. And I had him on my podcast, and I was like, I heard you say something that you said you don't really know if you love soccer anymore. And he was like, yeah, I don't really know if I love the game, the same way that 12-year-old kid who just wants to go out and kick the ball around and have fun does. He's like, I love the competitiveness of it. I love trying to get a little bit better each day. I love trying to improve myself. But, to say like, I just love soccer, he's like, I don't know if it's really like that for me anymore. And I think, and maybe this is a bit naive on my part, I think playing in college is such this unique experience where you're bonded by your teammates. You're all going through this together, and it's like this really tight-knit family. And I just kind of thought, oh man, if I can go do this at the professional level, have this tight-knit family, have everything be this close group, and I'm playing soccer and I get to make a living out of it, like, what can possibly be better than that? And I realized that it's different. It's different than that when money gets involved, when it's a professional, when people are trying to support themselves, when they're trying to make a career for themselves, it takes on a whole new connotation to the game. So I think Germany was where probably I started to shift my mindset a little bit more about the sport in general. But I still just had such a hunger and such a desire, I felt like, to see where I could go with the game, and to see what my limit was, what my peak was. Like, am I capable of playing at the pro level? And that was kind of where I first started to get some inklings of that. And Denmark was definitely another tough experience, where it was like, more or less, this was the life of a professional, where you wake up, you go to training, and there's not much else that you do during your day. And I just don't know if I felt really fulfilled enough in that, So yeah, probably those experiences overseas are what started to change my mindset a little bit.
And then how did you get from Denmark back to New York?
Yeah, it was I was honestly kind of ready to come back home anyway. I was speaking to my family a lot, speaking to my mom especially, and I was just like, and it was a really difficult decision for me to decide to leave, honestly. Looking back at it, I know it was the right decision for me. I know it was what I needed to do to just help myself mentally, but it was not easy by any stretch of the imagination. And it took me weeks to go over that. So I was ready to kind of fly back home anyway. Um, I was also going to see, my sister was graduating college, and initially my plan was to fly back home after once my season had ended. But I was like, you know what? Like, I think I need to be home anyway. And if I can go see her graduate too, like, I think I want to go and be home for that. So I flew home early to go and do that. And it was maybe like a week or two before I left was when this Shockers opportunity came about. I didn't even know the team was going to be starting. So I just had emailed that coach and was like, hey, I have this little bit of experience playing overseas, and could I come and play with the team? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. Whenever you get back, whether it's now or whether that's the end of your Denmark season, just let us know and you can pop in. So yeah, it was a little bit easier flying back home, being having an American passport and trying to fly to America. But yeah, so I think I flew like end of April back home.
And were you welcomed? And do your teammates have similar experiences?
Welcomes like by that Shockers team.
Yeah, the team as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. It was a good experience. It was some of the guys I had grown up playing with or playing against. So we kind of like knew of each other. And yeah, it's been a good experience being back with some of those guys. It was, so it was a little bit trippy, honestly, to go from, because Denmark was an experience where, full on, a lot of people in Denmark also speak English, but their first language is Danish, right? So all during training and everything, everyone's speaking in Danish. And then if anything, they're going to translate to you to speak with you. So to then come back and, be playing for a team called the New York Shockers and everyone's speaking English all the time, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. Because, and honestly, in a lot of my Denmark trainings, I would be just kind of silent because, the guys would be like, yeah, you can talk to me in English, it's fine, like when we're out on the field. But I felt like I wanted to try and assimilate to their culture, try and learn the language a little bit. And I wound up just being caught in between two minds. And a lot of time I was just quiet throughout training, and I didn't really talk to many people besides like, one or two guys. So then to come home to New York, speaking to everybody and getting along with everybody, it was a good experience. I definitely felt welcomed by the team, and it was a nice reprieve.
And what are you doing now?
So in the winter of this past year, after soccer season ended, I took probably the longest break from soccer that I ever had from training. I was coaching, but I was like, I'm just gonna take a break from the game. And then in like January, I kind of had a little bit of a bug for it again. And I was like, let me see if I can get some of these guys that played over the summer to see if they want to start training in the mornings. So I did that. And we went for a couple months doing some training again, just trying to see like, do I love this? Do I want to try and pursue it again? Do I want to go after another contract, or, is it time for me to do something different? And then, like I said, whether this is just the way that sports works, or if this is a higher power trying to send me a message, I am unfortunately in a, I don't know if you can see, I'm in a sling right now. I had funny enough, the original date that we were supposed to record this episode.
Oh, is this what happens? Is this why you ended up at the doctor?
Yes.
Oh
So we were
no.
supposed to record this last Thursday, I think. And I had training that morning, and I went to go and defend a guy who was about to shoot pretty close range, and he shot it probably as hard as he could, and it just connected right with my wrist and broke my wrist. So then Thursday I was in the orthopedic all day. Had to get my wrist reset, and then they were going to have a follow-up to see if I needed surgery for it. And then on the Monday after, I had the follow-up with the doctor, and he was like, yep, you're going to need surgery. So Wednesday of this past week, so I'm like 6 days post-surgery now. I got a plate and a bunch of screws put into my wrist, and I'm out for quite a while, dealing with this and mending with this. So yeah, that's where we're at now.
Do you feel as though these soccer gods are trying to tell you you're done?
Honestly, yeah, it does feel that way, and I think for me, this past year has been a real tumultuous ride for me, and really mentally been draining. And so, like, in a lot of the work that I've done with my therapist in the past year, it's been like that transition out of the game, which for a lot of athletes is one of the hardest things that you can do, because for your whole life you identify as an athlete. You know, for me, so much of my identity and who I am, which I'm now learning that it's not, I'm transitioning away from that, but you feel as though your self-worth, your identity is kind of tied into who you are as a player and who you are as an athlete. And so for me, starting to have those feelings of, I don't know if I love this anymore, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, it became difficult for me, because now I feel like I was battling my own self-identity. And so these past couple months, I in training, I was loving it at first, and then I was starting to kind of have that same feeling again of like, I don't know if I love this. Like, I didn't necessarily always wake up and get really excited to go to practice or to play in games. And so I was kind of like, thinking that it's time for me to try something new, and starting to become more to terms with it and get a little bit more excited about maybe pursuing some other things. Um, and then, like you said, the soccer gods sometimes have a way of either hitting you in the face with the answer, or just speeding up that answer for me. And so while I was maybe in a point where I was feeling close to being ready to move on from the game, I think this injury has sort of forced me to address all those feelings that much quicker. And everything has come right to the surface, and it's like, all right, how are you going to handle it right now with the game taken away from you? And it's a scary thing. It's daunting, even if it wasn't something that I was fully in love with in the same way as the past, it's also been kind of my crux. It's kind of been my comfort zone for a number of years. That's been where, it's like my therapist said the other day, she was like, it's hard for athletes when they have this one thing that is their source of, their physical and mental health. It's their source of their social circles. It's their source of self-worth. Sometimes their source of financial stability. Like, you have all these different things tied into this one sport, and then to have it taken away, it becomes challenging to be able to learn how to cope with that and deal with that. So yeah, the soccer gods certainly tell you things, or certainly maybe kind of lead you in a direction a little bit quicker than you would have maybe anticipated.
And who are you without soccer?
Wow. Waited till near the end to drop the big ones. I like it. Man, that's the question, right? That's the question that we as athletes are all trying to figure out, and whether we do the work early enough to figure it out during your career, then it will eventually come down to, there's going to be a time we're going to be forced to figure that out. And for some, it's just, I'm going to go into coaching because it's the next closest thing. And for some, it's, no, I'm really going to see who I am outside of the game entirely. So for me, I believed that my thought was always, I'm going to play for as long as I can, and then I'm going to go right into coaching. So that's the next best thing. And for the first time as of late, I have thought about just not doing either one of those things. I still do a little bit of, I do coaching now, but you know, I host a podcast similar to this, and I've really enjoyed that. I've really enjoyed having conversations with athletes, with other people in the game to give more behind the scenes look at the professional world. I've also, my podcast is in a network. So there's like a bunch of other shows that are in the network that a family member of mine actually started because he hosts a movie podcast. So I'm really been interested in learning kind of the ins and outs of the podcast industry, of, you know, learning how to sell ads for podcasts and grow shows and work with creators and stuff like that. So I think for me, to answer your question, who I am outside of the game, I think is somebody who is hard worker, has a good work ethic, is disciplined, is likes to challenge myself, likes to be involved in projects that I'm passionate about and that I'm excited about. It's also somebody who loves to spend time with his family, with his friends. And I think that's a big thing that I've loved about being back stateside now, is just getting more time with the people that I enjoy spending time with. And I think that's something for me that I'm going to continue to keep at the forefront of my life as much as I possibly can. So yeah, I think who I am is it's still an ongoing process of trying to figure that out, honestly, every day. But it's really just about finding the things that give me joy and give me some happiness, and not being afraid to maybe take a little bit leap outside of my comfort zone of what the past has been of soccer, and try new things and try and bet on myself that I can still be happy in something else besides soccer. So man, I hope one day I can give you a more concise answer to who I am. But you know, right now we're still kind of in the thick of it of figuring it out. But I think we're getting there closer and closer day by day.
And let's talk about your podcast now. What spurred it
Yeah,
on? How many episodes in are you, and where can we listen to it?
absolutely. The inspiration for it was actually when I was starting my journey overseas. After I came home from Germany, I was like, you know, I feel like I have some kind of cool stories, some of which I've laid out a little bit in here. You know, so if anyone wants to listen to them a little bit more in depth, you can check them out over there. I was just like, you know, I think maybe some people could gain some value from this, learning what it's like to play overseas, what it's like to play for different colleges, how to do it, all those types of things. And so I just started the podcast kind of telling my story, and then it evolved into, let me talk to some of the other players that I've played with and some of my coaches and you know, just people in the world, to kind of give you more of a behind the scenes look, an in-depth look at what the professional footballing world is like. Because I think, you know, I'm sure as you see, talking to so many different athletes, there's certainly like a perception of what a professional athlete is or a collegiate athlete is. When you actually sit down and talk to them, it's like, oh wow, I didn't know that, or I didn't understand that. And I'm learning new things about the game every day, every time I sit down and talk to a player. So it's been a really amazing journey doing that. I've done it now for about 2 years. I think this past week we just published episode 56 of it.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, and it's called In the 11 with Brendan Griffiths. And you can pretty much listen to it anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you know, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, all that good stuff. And we do the YouTube episodes for the video version as well, if you want to check it out over there.
And off the top of your head, which is the best episode?
I like this question, because usually people ask me when I talk about it. They're just like, "Well, what's your go-to episode?" And you know, not to slight any of the guests that I've had amazing people on. You know, I've had players who have played Division 3 and then go on to, you know, play for their national team. I've had players who've been pros for years. I've had coach, you know, just amazing people. But the one that I always say that sticks out to me is his name is Aramis Cousine. He is Canadian, and he also has a Ukrainian passport. So he was playing in Ukraine, and he had a really difficult experience over there. This was actually a couple years ago. So prior to now, and I've seen some of the things he's posted on social media now as well, and he's having a really difficult time with everything that's going on over in a country that means so much to him. But so he was in Ukraine at the time, I think 2018 or 19, was playing for a club. It was a really difficult experience, really taxing on him, kind of similar to my Denmark experience, but honestly, probably worse for him. And then he found an opportunity to go over to Denmark, and it was a really high level club, a great opportunity for him. And he was doing well, and he had this pain in his hip, and he was kind of unsure of what it was. He had a couple scans. Everyone just thought it was maybe like a strain or like a tweak or something like that. But he was like, he said then one day he woke up and he felt like a pop, and he was like, all right, this is not right. And he kept being persistent about it. And so eventually he found out that he actually had a really rare form of bone cancer. He had a form of Ewing sarcoma in his hip bone. And it was so unfortunate. He was in, oh, sorry, I think I cut out there for a second. He was in great form. He was playing in the top level. So it's called the Danish Superliga in Denmark. And he was maybe going to get called into the Canadian national team to go to the Olympics. Like, he was just on top of the world. And all of a sudden, boom, he gets hit with this news that he has cancer. And, now you're not just thinking about how does this affect my soccer career? You're like, how does this affect my life in general? And it was just amazing to hear, for such a young guy, a kid really, his mindset about the way he approached it. He was like, he took some time to kind of be upset about it and to wallow in, I guess, the feeling of being diagnosed with cancer. But then he was just like, all right, what do we do next? And how am I going to get myself back onto the field? So he flew home, and he underwent, countless, I think he had at least one surgery, if not more than one surgery. He had, chemo, radiation, everything, the whole 9 yards. Was out for months and months and months. And yeah, he finally was able to, I think, and all this was happening too as well, like during COVID. So he was extremely immunocompromised. He had to stay in his house the whole time to make sure, his family had to stay in the house too, to make sure that they weren't going out and, transmitting something to him. Just a crazy difficult time for him, but he was somehow able to stay positive through it. And then we have a mutual friend who is a coach of mine and a coach of his as well. And one day sent me a video and was like, look, he's out, he's out playing. He was like, I think just playing pickup with his dad or something. But then, fast forward a couple months, and he went back over to Denmark, and he was on trial again, and actually signed another professional contract. In last he was in Kazakhstan. I can't remember where he is at the moment right now. But yeah, to just hear a guy go from having a rare form of bone cancer to now playing professional soccer again. I mean, if that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what will.
That's amazing. See, these are the stories I love hearing about.
Yeah.
Like, this is why I do what I do. And I'm sure this is why you do what you do as well, because these people are incredible. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's why, I'm a big fan of what you do on your podcast. To hear, just hearing athletes' stories, it's an amazing thing. Because everyone is so unique. Everyone has a different journey for how they got to where they are. And you'll pretty much find that no one had an easy road to get wherever they needed to go. There's a lot of speed bumps, a lot of roadblocks, and some of them a lot bigger than others, but everybody had some difficulties along the way. So I think it's why it is not only, interesting to listen to, but it's also really important, like to share these athletes' stories, to give people a better understanding of who they are as athletes, but also as humans as well. So yeah, I completely agree. It's why I love what I do too.
That's amazing. Let me see when this episode is going to come out. I think you have like a month.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so January, February, March, April 6th. Oh, you don't have a month. It's actually closer than I anticipated. But April 6th, yeah. So this will come out. I'll put out stuff, posts on Twitter and Instagram. This entire interview will go on YouTube, and then the
Cool.
the edited podcast episode will come up on Apple, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And
Awesome. Yeah.
if there is anything that happens between now and April 6th that you can think of, you break another wrist. I don't know.
Oh
That you can
God.
think
Hopefully we
of
don't break the other one.
that you want included, just DM me and we can get that in the script. And then if you can just send me a picture of you that I can use for social media, that would be great. And I'll talk to you on the 6th. You'll get bombarded
Yeah.
with notifications. I hope
Yeah.
you love the
Yeah. The other
episode.
thing I was going to mention to you, I don't know if
Yeah.
you're interested at all, is to, if you want, like once you have it edited or whatever, I could post it on my feed
Yeah,
as
for sure.
well. And I could just kind of like give an intro, that this is your podcast. This is an
Yeah.
episode that I popped on with you. Because I super appreciate you having me on and
Yeah.
giving me the opportunity to speak. So definitely would love to share that on there as well and see if, maybe we can get some kind of cross promotion going.
Perfect. Yeah, of course. I mean, we can talk about that once this is published, for sure.
Perfect. Perfect. Perfect.
And once again, if there's anything else that you think that I missed talking about, anything that you wanted to include that we have not yet, the floor is yours.
Yeah.
And if there isn't,
Oh,
then there isn't.
oh. Sorry. I wasn't sure if you meant for after right now. No, I think we covered most of it. I would just say, yeah, again, I appreciate the work that you do kind of diving into the mental health side of sports, of athletes. I think it's a really important topic, especially now. You know, a really difficult thing for me when I was over in Denmark was, and then coming home and trying to work through the problems that I was having, was I kept feeling like, what's wrong with me, right? Like, this is what I wanted to do. This is what I wanted to pursue for my dream. What's wrong with me that I can't make it work, that I can't handle the adversity I'm faced with and can't get through it? But in talking to people more and more, it was like, what if you shift the dialogue from what's wrong with me to like, what's happening to me, right? And I think for me, like, I didn't give myself enough credit that I went to a foreign country where I knew absolutely no one in the middle of a pandemic, and then was like, hey, this is kind of tough. And like, you know, didn't have a support system really there to help me like I do where I am here. So I would encourage athletes, out there that are struggling to maybe shift that mindset a little bit, instead of always thinking like, what's wrong with me? Try and think, what's happening to me? Like, what are the circumstances that are affecting me? And what can I do to try and change them or to affect them? And then the other thing is just seek help. Like, and I don't mean that in like a negative way, because it's tough. It still feels like there's a little bit of a stigma around it sometimes with athletes, reaching out for resources. But there's so many athletes that are going through what you're going through. It's why I've tried to be more outspoken about the things that I've gone through, to hopefully give people an example of, somebody that was at times not okay, and that's okay. So if you need help, like, there are resources that are out there, even if it's, you want to call a fellow athlete and just kind of describe what you're going through or something. Like, seek the resources that you have at your access. I think therapy is a great thing. I think performance coaches, health coaches, anything like that where you can assist yourself is going to help you in terms of your game as well. And then too, I mean, not to shamelessly plug ourselves, but I think listening to podcasts like ours, where you can hear other athletes that are going through similar things to you, and understand that you're not the only one that's feeling it. You're not alone on an island, and no one knows what you're going through, that there are other people who are experiencing the same things, I think can be a really helpful and cathartic experience as well. So hopefully you can just continue to, push these messages forward, and athletes can live a healthier, more whole life.
think that's a great way to end it. I will talk to you on the 6th, and I hope you love this episode.
I am sure I'll love it. I had so much fun doing it. Thank you so much again for having me on and for adjusting as well when I had
well,
had my
you
little
broke your wrist.
setback.
Like everything's fine.
Yeah.
Have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Talk to you soon. Thanks so much, Julia.
Bye.